All right. A couple of things getting started. If you do have questions and you're dying to know, put them in the chat. I'll be checking there throughout the night. And then I'll stop at a couple of different points in time and see if anybody has any questions. So this seminar itself is entitled Nutrition from the Masters, not necessarily inclining that I'm one of those people, but I've had the opportunity to be able to follow around some of the best doctors in the world, in my opinion, in the world of nutrition. Sometimes I've been able to actually lecture with them, which has been a great honor. But it's really accumulation of years and years worth of studying nutrition and putting it all together in a way that I think will be a lot of fun for everybody. Just this slide has been updated recently. I'm going to play with my things here for a second. Mouse, draw, spotlight. Let's go with a draw. Right here. There we go. That's new. Got my RN just recently, on my way working towards my nurse practitioner degree. I'm a chiropractor, for those of you on here. I know most of the people in the group. A few new ones, and I am recording this, so it will be available for people that very likely won't know me. So in the chiropractic field, there are specialties similar to like a medical doctor would continue on to get, like a cardiologist or a neurologist. I have two. One's the diplomate in applied kinesiology, which is more or less a specialty in holistic medicine, and then another diplomate in nutrition as well. I've got the hours. I just haven't spoken or taken an 8-hour exam for my diplomate in neurology as well. So be a few more there along the way at some point. Plus, in less than a year, I'll have that nurse practitioner degree to go with it. So let's continue on here. There we go. All right. Oh boy. Let's I'm gonna have to get an eraser here. Won't play with that one as much. Okay, so a couple of disclaimers about the seminar is, one, it's typically, it started off as a 100-hour long seminar given over 8 weekends. Mostly for medical doctors, chiropractors, veterinarians, handful of nurses, and it's kind of morphed. I ended up deleting a whole bunch of slides just because obviously we don't have 12 hours straight to do that. But if I have a fault from a lecturing standpoint, it's that I lack the skills of brevity. So we'll go as long as you're interested, but I'm sure that over the course of a 2-hour seminar, just in case if people do want to get to the website or be able to call me, email me, I'll put the contact information right up front, so that's there. And I'm going to show this in 2 different parts. One, just so that you could see on the top of the screen here, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And why I bring this up is that 100-hour course that I had written in nutrition. My plan all along was to have an entire year's worth of the gold standard of research, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, have 12 issues of it all year long and read all of it, as fun as that might sound, reading all those journal articles. And I really wanted it to be something special so that the doctors coming were truly up on the latest and greatest that was being published. And as boring and as hard as it can be to read through journal articles, I opened up the inside cover, and this is the inside cover of every issue. And I'm just going to focus in on one particular area and kind of be cynical for a minute. And it's no wonder why nutrition is one of those subjects that people there's conflicting information a lot. You hear a lot of different things. What do you trust? What do you not trust? And even in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, if you can see this, I took a screenshot of it. It says the sustaining members for the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And we take a look at people down the line here. We've got places like Cadbury and Campbell's. We've got Monsanto on the list, General Mills, GlaxoSmithKline, Kellogg's, Kraft, Mars, McDonald's, PepsiCo, Pfizer. So really a whole lot of processed and refined food companies and a whole lot of pharmaceutical companies, which just kind of floored me that you'd have the sustaining members of a journal that's like that, that's going to have these types of companies. And if you don't have a little bit of cynicism about what you're going to trust and not going to trust as far as what's going to be published, that hopefully will open up your minds a little bit. And actually it answers why things are so difficult, what research you trust or don't trust, what doctors you trust, what websites you trust. So hopefully we'll be able to touch on some things that'll be really helpful for you. The other thing is, we weren't really given an owner's manual on day one. And hopefully by the end of this lecture, we're going to cover a good broad look at your owner's manual and some of the major things. You don't need to know all the scientific names and chemical names of things, but if you're following the basic flow on some things, it'll really go a long way for helping you understand the owner's manual that you have for the body. And we'll start it off with a quote from Dr. Royal Lee, he started Standard Process. Is the oldest whole food supplement company in the world. And he stated back in 1951, one of the biggest tragedies of human civilization is the procedure of chemical therapy over nutrition. It's the substitution of artificial therapy over natural, of poisons over food, in which we are feeding people poison and trying to correct the reactions of starvation. One of the biggest mistakes medical science has ever done is to provide drugs to people who are starving. And I think that that's incredibly well stated as far as what I see in the office and the state of people's health throughout the world these days. There comes a point in time where there's just nothing that's known as a drug deficiency. It's never been documented. There's no such thing as a drug deficiency, whether it's Prilosec or Nexium that you're dealing with from an acid reflux standpoint. You don't have a Nexium deficiency. All the way on up through, almost any medications that you could think of. We don't have a deficiency in them. So that's one important thing to keep in mind. And another one to keep in mind is where we are on a scale of 0 to 10 as far as our health. 0, obviously, we'll put that at death. We don't want to be there yet. And 10 out of 10 being the healthiest that we could possibly be. Very robust immune system, be able to fight off just about everything that's coming along. And we'll talk about that scale, throughout the night tonight. And this is a brochure, actually. It's one of my favorite brochures that Standard Process puts out. And I will annotate it here for a second. Use this one. So you might see your normal whole food multivitamin with a list about this long. You might have 10, 12, 15 things in your normal whole food or a multivitamin. And one thing that I love about this is with Catalin from Standard Process, their whole food multivitamin, they take carrot root, which is just one particular piece of what's in Catalin, and they've mapped out now the entire list of everything that we know of that's in just carrot root. Okay, and these are things that we know of at this point. Go ahead and erase these here. Which brings up a couple of different important points here. One is, what do we know as far as nutrition? We discover new nutrients on a constant basis. And if we don't know what something is, we're never going to make it in a chemistry laboratory. And that's the beauty of Catalin. Anytime that they have discovered a new nutrient and gone back and tested Catalin, it's already in there because it's in the food that makes up a whole food supplement like this. And it's a really important piece when somebody is going to be given a supplement that's a multivitamin. You're going to be limited to 15 or 20 things maybe in that supplement anyway, most of the time. And it's going to be synthetically made in a laboratory. And if we don't know what it is, you're not going to be able to make it and put it in there anyway. Okay. So a couple of fun points as we're moving on. Consider the following for a second. Do you know of any industry other than the healthcare industry that says with a straight face and gets away with it, the quality of the materials that go into building our products are irrelevant, and the quality of the materials that are used to maintain the operation of our products are also irrelevant? And if we consider the human body as the product of the healthcare industry, this is certainly the idea that's being conveyed to every one of us. The human body, everything that it does, every function, every cell in the body runs on nutrients. Every single day, they're being broken down, rebuilt up, And at different rates, you know, certain cells you're being regenerated on a daily basis. Some of them are as long as 7 years, but truly within 7 years, every single cell in your entire body is brand new. So, you know, are we going to be rebuilding it with Wonder Bread and a lot of processed and refined food, or are we going to be able to rebuild it with the nutrients that it was intended for? You know, even something as simple as actually 4 months here, for every single red blood cell in your entire body is new in a 4-month period of time. So that's even one milestone. People say, well, I've had this problem for a really long period of time. How long is it going to take to really start noticing some major differences? And that's actually one benchmark that's a good one to kind of be able to bridge that gap of say, all right, well, let me give this a 4-month period of time. Every red blood cell in my body has been rebuilt on better nutrition. And usually you're going to start noticing some things at that point. Another thing that's used sometimes is for every year that you've had something going on, let's say you've had 20 years of a particular health problem, then about a month nutritionally for each year that you've had something going on. Just as a ballpark, you know, I've had people that turned around 1,000 times faster than I had expected, but just as a ballpark. Just going through different mentors that I've had throughout the years and talking about what's going to happen with our nutrition, what's going to happen with disease in our body. If our body created it, it just makes sense that it could uncreate it if we're going to change the stimulus involved, the nutrition that's going to be involved. And Dr. Goodhart, who's the founder of Applied Kinesiology, he was the first chiropractor ever to be on the Olympic Medical Board, and one of the greatest healers that's, in my opinion, ever walked the earth. One of the sayings that he always had said was, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again without getting the results that you want, then that's not it. And, you know, that's true. We'll keep taking the same supplement or the same drug and expect it, you know, just like, well, let me just keep taking it, and nothing's happening. You know, we need to sometimes take a little bit deeper look about what's going on here to get the results, you know, especially from a mechanical standpoint. Your typical chiropractic visit, if, you know, you've got some simple pain and you haven't seen any difference in 3 or 4 visits, then you're probably missing something. You know, it shouldn't take, you know, months and months and months to notice any differences. So continuing on here, I will skip through a few slides just because I said this was originally a 12-hour lecture. But the current plan, this is what most people are doing. They're going to the junkyard. They're getting junk food, processed and packaged, devitalized food, chemical imitation fractions of nutrients, indigestible mineral supplements for rebuilding strong, enduring stress handling, effective, healthy bodies out of that. And we just understand that we're one of the sickest nations that we've ever seen throughout all of human history as a result of doing that. You know, and if the airline industry worked in that same way, that they built their aircraft out of scrap metal from the junkyard, you know, and their jets are constantly malfunctioning and crashing, the airline runs elaborate testing, and then they're going to go ahead and say, you know what, we're going to put some duct tape over the check engine light and basically say that that's a cure. We're going to, you know, take care of things in a way that we can get rid of this symptom and this symptom. We can stop that noise from the propeller. We can, you know, dampen that a little bit. But, you know, eventually that aircraft is going to crash, and eventually the human body crashes too. You know, we have an amazing ability to handle a tremendous amount of stress. The body was built to be able to handle different stresses and to make changes over time. But, you know, some things that we just need to be able to, you know, make those changes. You know, just for a quick example of that, for whatever reason, if you were in the Antarctic and sitting naked on a pad of ice, you're on an igloo, for whatever reason, you'd be doing that. And, you know, what would your body be doing at that point? It would be shunting all of your blood to your core to keep you alive as long as possible. And that's its job, is to keep you alive as long as possible. And it doesn't care if your toes fall off or your fingers fall off, or if you know, having any number of different problems. It wants to keep you alive as long as possible. And, you know, we need to understand that process, that the body largely is smart and it knows what it's doing. So whether it's raising your blood pressure, or you're incredibly fatigued, or you've got diarrhea, you know, any number of different things, we need to start taking a better look at the signs and symptoms that we're experiencing, and not just cover them up on purpose, and having a better understanding of what they mean and what the body is actually attempting to do. Usually the body is trying to do something in some way or another, and we'll show some different fun examples throughout the night of what that's going to look like. Okay. But the bottom line, no industry in existence could ever get away with such blatant nonsense, deception, and downright lack of common sense, except for the healthcare industry. They basically, you know, they'll say you can use your 42,000 units of insulin through the day and eat 15 bear claws and pretty much eat whatever you want. We'll just balance it out with sugar that will, or insulin that we'll inject you with. You know, and if you look at, if I've ever been to your rehab facility, you go to an old folks home, or even in the hospital, look at the food there and tell me that that's supposed to be life-sustaining and actually rehabilitating to somebody. And hopefully there's a few people chuckling that's listening in, because, you know, we just know in most cases that's not true. A lot of that food is kind of slopped on there, pretty devitalized, and not really adding to health in any major way, in most places anyway that I've seen. So I'm sure most people will agree to that. But from a nutritional standpoint, I used to, on day one in practice, I wanted to flip people's lives upside down, be as strict as we possibly could, get them from point A to point B in their healthiest selves that they can be in the quickest period of time. And that's not always easy for somebody who's 80 years old, type 2 diabetic, and been eating like crap and 300 pounds overweight, and they've been doing that their entire life. You know, making small changes that we can do daily are something that we can follow through on. So even the 2% changes that we can do. And there was a great article in Sports Illustrated that talked about 2% improvements. And there was actually one where they had compared Jack Nicklaus and Bob Charles one particular year. And they were actually only different through the entire year by 2 strokes. But Jack Nicklaus had made 100 times more money than Bob Charles had that year, as a difference of 2 strokes. But on a nutritional comparison, you know, even something as simple as 1 cookie a day adds up to about 5 pounds in a year. So even little things, we don't have to flip our lives upside down always to have some consistent improvements, to try to be ourselves at our best. But we do have that U.S. buffet mentality. Quantity is looked at very much more strongly than quality these days. It's more and more and more bigger. We're going to inject a lot of our fruit with different gases and make it look bigger and make it look prettier. You know, we're going to load our chickens and our cows and give them an immense amount of grains and crap that they would never eat, to fatten them up and to, you know, create a larger yield of material to be able to be sold at our grocery stores. And there's a lot of quality that's taken out of a scenario like that. So I'm going to switch over for just a second, if I can figure this out. To a whiteboard. We're going to talk about cholesterol. All right. So from cholesterol standpoint, there's a few things that I want to talk about, because this is such a big player. We think about heart disease. It's one of your top few killers that everybody has to deal with. Okay. And we're going to just take one particular scenario and say that we've got somebody's arteries here, and you've got cholesterol plaquing that's going on here. And in order to get blood to flow through a narrower area, automatically that's going to mean an increase in somebody's blood pressure. And what are we going to do? Some of the main medications that are going to be utilized for something like that is we could use something like a beta blocker. A beta blocker basically is going to put your heart to sleep. It's going to pump less. It won't be as hard. It's going to slow it down, and it'll bring your blood pressure down for sure. That's what it's meant to do. But one point that I want to make is it absolutely does nothing for this cholesterol plaquing that's going to be here on the inside arteries of our wall. It's just going to force the blood pressure to come down. And now I want to tie this in a little bit with what the body is attempting to do, all right? If you've got a narrowed space here, and we already know that blood pressure is going to go up because you still need to get blood. Where's the most important place for blood to get in the body? It's going to be our brain, for sure. You know, you can live for a certain period of time. I think the world record is well over 20 minutes for somebody being able to hold their breath. But I mean, you talk nanoseconds of not getting blood to your brain, that could be catastrophic. So the body, being incredibly smart, is going to tell the heart to pump harder so that we can pump blood through these blood vessels that aren't as healthy anymore. But as Western medicine has decided that it's smarter than the body, they're going to give people things like beta blockers. They're going to slow down the heart, and they're going to bring down blood pressure. Okay? And we have to ask ourselves, you know, what there's times and places for this. Don't get me wrong. You know, I'm going to sound a little bit cynical, but I've gone back to school and put in, I can't even tell you how many hours studying so that I can actually prescribe medications myself. There's times and places, but I just want you to understand how the body is functioning and what we're trying to use to overcome what the body is trying to do. So beta blockers are one way that we're going to be able to do that, and slowing down the heart. You know, not necessarily what everybody wants to do is to have their heart slow. And imagine what's going to happen with that. We're going to artificially lower blood pressure, even though the body wants it higher. And a lot of times you'll end up with being lightheaded and dizzy. Easier to fall. You know, even you stand up and all of a sudden you feel like you're going to pass out. Things like that can happen much more easily as a result of that. Then we've got a couple other types of medications, and they work similarly. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of depth about each one, but we've got ACE inhibitors and calcium channel blockers that are both going to basically take an artery and it's going to relax all the muscle so that it's going to be wider, all right, and which is going to bring blood pressure down. You create what's called vasodilation. You've made it wider, and now everything, the pressure is going to come down as a result of that. Now, if you do that over to this scenario, yeah, you're going to have a wider artery, but you're still going to have all of that plaquing that's going to be here, but bring blood pressure down. Still having done nothing for all of the plaquing that's here on the inside lining of the arteries, right? And now we've got another class of drug that's going to be called a diuretic, okay? If we know what diuretic means, you're going to pee a lot. You're going to get, draw off a lot of fluid off of the body. So if you lower the volume, it's just simple physics, you're going to lower the blood pressure. But again, none of those things do anything for the plaquing that's going on inside the arteries. So what do? We have a scenario where we've got all of this plaquing going on inside the lining of the arteries. And back in the day, you have anatomists that open up a cadaver and they open up the arteries and they say, oh my goodness, look at that cholesterol. That's horrible. Cholesterol's got to be the worst possible thing that anybody could ever have in their body. So, because look what it's doing. It's narrowing these arteries all over the body, even more catastrophic when it's narrowing them near the heart. So this is a bad thing. Cholesterol is horrible for you from this particular perspective. And, Western medicine has certainly run with that. We used to say that if your cholesterol was 300 and you had other risk factors like smoking, like your weight, a whole lot of different things that could be involved with that, then we would be concerned about your cholesterol. And almost the day Lipitor came out on the market, they said, you know what, we were so wrong about this 300 number. We actually want it to be 180. So, big drastic difference there, going from 300 to 180 almost overnight. And the whole thing has a focus on this cholesterol here being the problem. And what I want us to take a look at now is, well, why is the body putting cholesterol there to begin with? Why would the body want to do that? If it's smart, and like I said earlier, has a reason for doing what it's going to do, why would the body want to do something like that? There's a few reasons. For one, depending on what we're going to eat, you could have a lot of, for example, sugar, that's going to result in a lot of inflammation. That sugar is going to result in a lot of insulin, which is one of the most degenerative hormones that you could have floating around your body. There's no, you want to have insulin functioning sharply and working perfectly, but you don't want a lot of this stuff floating around your body. It's incredibly degenerative. But people just put slugs and slugs of insulin into their body every single day, still having those degenerative effects because they're trying to drive sugar into the cells of their body because their body can't do it anymore. They can't either make enough insulin or that insulin's not working very well, so we need to give even more insulin to try to drive sugar into the cell. But because of all of this sugar and all of this insulin and all of the other inflammatory, even just stress, I got 3 midterms next week. You got relationship issues. You've got, bills and, COVID and people's businesses that are falling apart and riots that have happened all over the place. There's plenty of places for stress. And that stress can lead to the breakdown of the lining of the artery. And so that we don't bleed to death, the body patches it up. And guess what it patches it with? You're going to put a little cholesterol plaque here, which is fine. We have some stress. We got a little bit of sugar. But what happens when you do this for every meal of the day, every day of the week, every week of the year, for decades of your life? You're going to have little microfiber tearing and plaquing, and little microfiber tearing and plaquing. And eventually it's going to get narrower and narrower and narrower. And everybody is blaming cholesterol. Cholesterol is this big bad thing, and what they don't realize is if the body wasn't this smart and plaquing and trying to put that Band-Aid there until you were smart enough to get off that igloo, or in this case, the inflammatory lifestyle, the body will keep plaquing that until the point where you just can't get blood through anymore. And yeah, you're going to have a heart attack, and that's one of the major ways that people die these days. But the question is cholesterol the big bad guy that everybody makes it out to be? And in this particular case, when you open an artery, you could see why people would think that cholesterol is this big bad thing. But cholesterol makes up every cell. If you remember back to biology class, we've got this bilipid layer of every single cell in the entire body, significantly made up of cholesterol. Every single hormone, and we'll actually take a look at this a little bit later, every hormone in the body is made up of cholesterol. And we're going to take medications that are going to mess with cholesterol. Now you're messing with every single cell in the entire body, every single hormone in the entire body. And for what outcome are we looking for? There are research studies that are all over the board, but there's several good ones that suggest that whether you're taking a cholesterol medication or not taking a cholesterol medication isn't going to really change somebody's life expectancy on a significant level. There's even some studies that would suggest taking a cholesterol medication would actually shorten your life expectations. And there's a lot that goes into that. That we can get into specific lectures just on heart disease and on cholesterol. But this is just to draw a few different points here so that we understand one of our major killers today and what's going on with our blood vessels. We are going to touch on a little bit later some genetic things. And everybody's lining of their arteries are different. And one of the genetic markers that I love to look at has to do with the number of copies of something called 9p21. All right. Ideally, you have 0 copies of this gene. And if you've got 0 copies, that would be the equivalent of having arteries like titanium. Doesn't mean that they can't have problems, but these things are strong. And you can have stress in your life and sugar in your life and insulin, and they will be the most resistant to being broken down. And then we can have upwards of 4 copies of this gene. And having 4 copies of this gene would be the physical equivalent of having arteries more like tissue paper. All right. So that's going to be a big difference for somebody. You could almost, with this one marker, and if you know that somebody has 4 copies of the 9p21 gene, you, with probably 99% knowing that how that person's going to do, unless it's an accident that nobody can really predict, there's an incredibly high likelihood that this particular individual is their demise is going to be because of something cardiovascular related if you have 4 copies of this gene, because in this case the lining of the arteries are so weak, you're going to either end up with some type of a bleed, a hemorrhage, or you're going to get that plaquing on a massive level like we talked about, and they'll just be that much more susceptible. All right. So that's just one genetic marker out of 50, 60 that I look at with a lot of patients that really can go a long way in helping, have an outlook on somebody's health and their longevity in their life. So let's switch back over. Hope this is what we're doing here. All right. So sugar intake. If we take a look at the beginning of this graph, we used to have incredibly small amounts of sugar in our diets. Even something like bread. If you were going to go out and find enough grain, grind it down, bake with it, you might have a scenario where you'd have a loaf of bread and it's going to be bad in a couple of days anyway, because you didn't have refrigeration and it was just not energy efficient to go do all that work. Bread just wasn't a big part of sustaining our lifestyle and our quality of life. And as you can see, as we get towards the, more or less in the mid 1950s, just even in the early 1900s, the amount of refined and processed foods goes up exponentially. And so has a lot of our degenerative diseases as well. And this is what that's ultimately led to. A lot of type 2 diabetes is earned. It's not something you're born with, like type 1 diabetes, where you actually have some genetic issues. Type 2 diabetes is earned, and it used to be earned in people's 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, and now you've got kids in their, under 10 years old that are earning this disease because of what they're eating, and they're completely shutting down their pancreas and their ability to either make insulin or their sensitivity. Their body is making some insulin, but it's just not working the way that it's supposed to be. And they're injecting for the rest of their life. But what people need to understand, every doctor in the world knows that type 2 diabetes is reversible. It is possible. I've done it with several different people where they have been, on just about every diabetes medication that you could have, and still having a hard time controlling their blood sugar and being able to get that back down to normal levels and not on their diabetes medications anymore. It is doable. We'll have some seminars down the road that'll be specifically geared just towards diabetes. But again, this is the owner's manual, just kind of covering and glossing over some of the important pieces here. So one of the problems here with sugar is there is a difference between sugars that are more natural and sugars that are going to be synthetic and processed, in the sense that some sugars, like you're going to get sugar from your fruit, but sugar is sugar. It's what goes along with that. Is there any nutrition, vitamins and minerals that's going to come along with that sugar along the way on that trip through the body? Or is it going to be completely bleached white, not have any nutritional value whatsoever, and be empty calories? And not only does it not have nutritional value to it, but it actually requires the body to dip into its reserves of all sorts of different nutrients to break it down. So not only is it not sustaining and giving life from a nutrition standpoint, it's actually emptying your bank account of a lot of vitamins and minerals to be able to break it down and to deal with that. So important piece there. When we take a look at sugar and the immunity, we'll look at this first top level here. If we don't have any sugar, we're having more of a ketogenic type of a lifestyle, or just generally lower sugar than the average American diet. The number of bacteria a white blood cell can process in about a half hour is 14. And we've got 0 decrease in our immunity. We go down to about 6 teaspoons in an 8-ounce soft drink. We've gone down to 10 bacteria that a white blood cell can process in a half hour. And we work our way down to the 24 teaspoons, the banana split, And the uncontrolled diabetic, we're down to about 1 bacteria in a half-hour period of time. And this will last upwards of about 8 to 12 hours afterwards from having this amount of sugar. Well, we'll get a decrease in our immunity, in this case, of 92%. Just kind of let that sink in a little bit and what that means for our immunity. And let that sink in for something that we're going to talk about in a little bit, the difference between what we call germ theory, is, oh, we've got this bug in our body and this is going to cause a disease, and something we call terrain therapy, where, well, what's the terrain like in our body? How healthy is our actual body and its immune system, and it's how rugged is it and capable of dealing with things? So, the amount of sugar, our immune system is going to be weakened. Will your family, will you get sick? Are you going to have a downward spiral? Are you somebody that's, I get the flu or I get sick 3 or 4 times a year. It's just the way that it's always been. It doesn't always have to be that way. It may be something that is normal for you, but it's not a normal situation to be, sick multiple times a year. You don't have to catch the flu. There's a lot of people that, you're around that, they're sick with all sorts of different things. You've got bugs inside your body right now that could kill, somebody that is immune compromised right this very second, but your immune system's strong enough to be able to fight those things off. And we'll get into that again in a little bit. But from a eating standpoint, and we want to look at deaths, this is right out of Harvard School of Public Health. Eating trans fats, particularly margarine, kills, they say, between 30,000 and that's a big gap here. Let's go on the smaller side just for the sake of argument. 30,000 deaths every single year specifically related to eating trans fatty acids. That's huge. We had, back in 1999, there was roughly almost 16,000 deaths from alcohol-related crashes. In 1999, it was estimated that there were 300,000 premature deaths due to obesity. That's largely preventable. You're not eating donuts, not eating potato chips that are loaded with these trans fats. Trans fats largely are plastic fats. And imagine a cell that's supposed to allow nutrition in and waste products out, and now that cell is turning more to plastic. And it's that much harder to get nutrition in and waste products out, and somebody's health responding along those lines. So I'm going to cover a few different important pieces here. This is actually a major piece of our fatty acids in the body. Okay, let me pull up my little drawing tool here. You don't need to worry about all the different major names, but this is our different prostaglandins. We've got prostaglandin 1 and prostaglandin 3. These are typically what people think of as our good prostaglandins. They're anti-inflammatory in nature, and that's largely what we try to do. So from this prostaglandin 3 pathway, you have things on the top end here, like with flax, which will ultimately end up as a prostaglandin 3. That's a good thing, but it's just not as efficient because there's multiple steps that have to take place to end up to become prostaglandin 3. So instead, one of the easier ways, a lot less steps to take place, is fish oil. Okay, fish oil will be a simple conversion as long as that we've got, some other nutrition along here. You need E, you need vitamin C, B6, magnesium to make this jump. But we've got enough of that nutrition. We get to prostaglandin 3. It's very anti-inflammatory in nature, and it's one major goal that we want to try to get to. All right, very important. We have largely these prostaglandin 1s are what we would call our omega-6s. Over here, we've got our omega-3s. Largely over here are omega-6s. And for the most part, the average American diet, we get plenty of omega-6s. This isn't really a major issue for being able to get some of these oils. But one of the really important pieces here that I want to show is that even going through this pathway down here or down the prostaglandin 3 pathways is what's going to inhibit or stop those from taking place. Massive doses of insulin, high doses of vitamin E, lithium, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen, a lot of food additives. If anybody wants to know about how many food additives we have in these days, it's just astronomical. We could have a whole lecture just on that. And these are all things that are going to block getting to our prostaglandin 3 and block getting to our prostaglandin 1. So that's one major issue that we have to deal with. And then we have this area here. Okay. This is where medical science really tries to have a big focus, is right here on prostaglandin 2. There's an enzyme here called COX, cyclooxygenase. They try to block cyclooxygenase with our non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. We've got things like Celebrex, our ibuprofens, our everything that's going to work. We're trying to block at this level to stop prostaglandin 2 because it's largely an inflammatory thing that's going on in the body. But keep in mind, everything in the body has to be in balance. We still do need prostaglandin 2. But largely, this is what they're trying to do, is block prostaglandin 2. And it comes at a cost. One of the major costs of doing this is that for a lot of them, you're going to affect platelets. And when you affect platelets, right, you're going to have an effect on bleeding. And you know, that's where people will develop ulcers, GI bleeds, strokes, hemorrhagic strokes. They're bleeding out because their platelets aren't working properly. So that's one potential issue when you're dealing with the breakdown here and you're using these non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. Another issue that you're going to have, so you've got bleeding and platelet-related issues, but you're also going to be driving things more in this direction because you're not going to prostaglandin 2. And leukotrienes, as we'll see on a slide, leukotrienes can be 1,000 times more inflammatory than histamine in the body. So even though up front you're blocking inflammatory processes going on, you actually can shift long-term into some things that are going to be even more inflammatory on a chronic level. So you know, this whole chart, we could spend an entire day just talking about every little piece and all the names. Right now, all the names of these things don't matter quite as much. Just if you get some of those take-home pieces. Prostaglandin 1 and 3, very important, anti-inflammatory in nature. Prostaglandin 2 is going to be inflammatory, and largely we try to block this. And when you block this through using medications, our non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, we're going to screw up platelets, and we're going to long-term make things more inflammatory in the long run. One thing that's really neat is that as you're going down this particular pathway for prostaglandin 1, okay, there is a pathway that can convert over to arachidonic acid and actually continue and cascade down into creating more inflammation. But you can block this entire pathway using EPA, which is one of the major components of fish oil. So we're getting from fish oil a massive anti-inflammatory effect because of our prostaglandin 3s directly. We're also getting a massive benefit from not allowing this pathway to even take place, going from our prostaglandin 1 pathway into the 2 pathway because we can block it with essential fats. This is one of the reasons why I tell people from a nutritional supplement standpoint, of everything that I recommend, this is almost always number 1 on the list. It's considered a essential nutrient. They're not something that the body can make on its own. You actually have to ingest them. And if you're not going to be eating plenty of fish, you know, it's just more limited and more difficult to be able to get in those types of fats. They're essential fats for a reason. Our body needs them to be as healthy as possible, from lubricating our joints to making up every cell in the body to making our hormones. Our brain is largely made of fat. Every nerve is covered by fat and all the impulses that are taking place. The list goes on as how important fatty acids are in the body. So we'll erase this so it's not taking up everything. Bear with me. I think that's most everything. There we go. So like I said, leukotrienes are going to be 1,000 times more inflammatory than histamine. And on the bottom, the last 2 here that's really important, the very last one especially, the trans fatty acids. You know, we say that we're going to cut out donuts now finally, we're getting rid of our trans fats in the body. We're not eating margarine anymore. Trans fats have a 51-day half-life. That means in 51 days from now, almost 2 months after making these incredible changes in your diet, some people that's going to be very difficult. So they're really, digging down deep. They're trying hard. Now, half of the trans fats that have built up in their body have now been able to be processed and gotten rid of. All right. So think about our cells being plastic, and now after 2 months, they're kind of like half plastic, if you will. Not a perfect correlation, but you kind of get the idea. It takes a while to be able to get and process these things out of the body. And by making nutritional, like, oh, I ate a carrot once. Like, okay, well, it's going to take a little bit longer than that carrot, and eating, a couple of good meals, or even a week or two of good meals, to be able to really truly change the terrain of the body, to be this very robust system, to be able to handle pretty much whatever's coming at it. Okay, and that's what gets us into our two different major theories, and both are important. There are bacteria. You've got Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and that gets in the body, and your immune system can't handle that. You are going to absolutely develop tuberculosis, and that's what that particular bug's going to do. There's a whole list of antibiotics that you're going to use and try to fight something like that. So there are bacteria that cause diseases, but what is very important that a lot of times people overlook is terrain theory. What does the terrain look like? Let's use a different analogy. Are you in a spotless, scrubbed surgical unit or a garbage dump? Where would you expect to see rats and mice and bacteria and molds and funguses and diseases? Obviously in the trash dump. And you would expect, although some things can happen, a surgical unit, something could happen. If ventilation isn't perfect, or if something isn't cleaned properly, yeah, things happen in a great environment also. And the same can happen too. If you eat absolutely perfectly and you're exercising constantly, and everything that you could imagine, you've checked off everything on the list, can you still get sick? Absolutely. I mean, it's not saying that there's 100% hall pass that you're never going to get sick. But if you've got very strong terrain and your immune system is robust, most of the time your body can deal with and handle what comes at it. And, we're largely seeing that a lot now with COVID. That's why they're saying largely people with comorbidities are the ones that are going to be having the hardest time dealing with it. Their terrain, they're likely overweight, they've got respiratory issues, they've got detoxification issues, their livers are shutting down, their kidneys are shutting down, they're on dialysis, they're, any number of different health-related problems where functions are shutting down in the body, and their immune systems aren't robust enough to be able to handle that. And this goes true for every disease that's out there. There are people that are going to be just their immune system's down, and they're not eating the right things, they're not taking care of their body the right way, and they're going to be more susceptible than the average person. And there's a lot more involved with it. Obviously, there's some things genetically speaking, like the weakened blood vessels with that one gene that we talked about, or if they've genetically got issues where they can't even process certain nutrition, or absorb it or utilize it properly. There's a lot of factors. But in general, we want to know what our terrain is, what our possible terrain is, genetically speaking. What are we capable of? What's the peak, the pinnacle of what our body is able to handle, and live our lives at the highest quality of life as a result of that. Or what the average American certainly does, and that's why we've got a society that's got more disease, and heart disease, diabetes, cancers than we ever have throughout all of human history. And both of these work together, both germ theory and the terrain theory. We have a lot of control over our own personal terrain and what we're going to expose ourselves to and how strong we're going to build ourselves up. Okay. But, sometimes it's not even as easy. You take something like the U.S. water supply, it was shown in this research article that we had 10 times the amount of antibiotics as the German water supply. Kind of gross when you think about it. The amount of stuff that we have a scenario where, I think I've got this on a slide a little bit later as well, but we have it, legally speaking, what we're allowed to have in our drinking water when it gets to treatment plants and it ends up at our house. And what's legally allowed and what we're physically capable of doing are two totally different things. We can't even meet what our government says our clean water is supposed to be. But we'll get into that in a little bit. So, Nutrition 101, looking at our labels, our supplements, and nutrition on any of our food that we're going to be eating. We are allowed to, and companies are allowed to write natural on just about everything, and even organic. You'd be surprised. Chemically speaking, organic means it has carbon in it, and just about everything that you eat has carbon in it, so legally you can call it organic. What more importantly we want to see is something is certified organic. That's truly what, in your mind and everybody's mind, when you hear the word organic, that you've got something that hasn't been sprayed with pesticides and all sorts of other chemicals coming into the body. So be real careful with things that are talked about as natural or even organic. Certified organic is definitely where we want to be focusing our attention. We're going to look at a few different nutrients to kind of get an idea of things that from a natural standpoint and from a synthetic made in a laboratory standpoint. So vitamin C, Linus Pauling, when he won the Nobel Prize, he said, here you go, ascorbic acid. This is, the most amazing discovery that we've had in a long time. And it was within months after winning the Nobel Prize and continuing his research, he went to the Nobel people. He said, guys, I kind of got this all wrong. There's a lot more to vitamin C than ascorbic acid. And they basically told him to shut up and we don't want to know about it. And there is. Vitamin C, like all complexes, are made up of a lot of different things. Ascorbic acid, to the equivalent for vitamin C, and what it does, it's kind of like the shell of an egg. The shell keeps it protected. It's an important piece of the egg. But if I gave you 1,000 shells, you'd kind of laugh and say, just scramble me up 2 or 3 eggs and I'll be fine. And the same thing kind of goes into play with vitamin C. If you're going to use ascorbic acid, it's not going to have the same benefits as something that you're going to have that entire complex. And there's a lot of complexes in it. There's pieces that are going to help with our bioflavonoid and our vascular integrity. So those blood vessels being strong and stopping you from bleeding. Or in the long end result of what we used to call the limeys coming over from England, when you have people developing scurvy because it's a vitamin C deficiency. And what did they do? They used limes. Very little bit of lime juice. You get plenty of vitamin C coming in, and you'll cure scurvy very quickly. But those same people, if you gave them thousands and thousands of milligrams of ascorbic acid, it would not cure their scurvy. Okay, very important to understand the difference there, that there's just so much more to vitamin C than its ascorbic acid protector. And this is a great look on a microscopic level. On the left, where you see natural vitamin C, where you have all of the pieces doing what it's going to do, and you've got ascorbic acid on the right. It looks more plain. There's a lot less to it because it's not making up the entire process. And vitamin C is incredibly powerful. You could have, it's one of the more potent things that you could do to break somebody's fever, actually. If you've got not ascorbic acid, but you actually have C in its entire form, have amazing benefits as far as breaking people's fever. It's one of the easiest things that you could do with children. They've got a fever of some sort, and get them a little bit of this entire C complex. Goes a really, really long way there. Vitamin E is the same way. You put alpha tocopherol usually on a label. Well, there's 7 different tocopherols, and they're all precursors and antioxidant protectors of the entire E complex. We can kind of go on all day about every single nutrient individually. But when it all comes down to it, I'll have somebody that'll come into the office and they'll say, yeah, I've got back pain. I don't need to fill out the rest of this. I'm healthy otherwise. And they'll go ahead and they'll fill out the rest of the questionnaire, and they've got headaches and sinus infections and joint problems and digestive issues and low energy and sleepless problems and chronic infections and allergies and toothaches and bladder infections and on and on and on. They've got depression, they're irritable, they've got heart disease, anemias, they bruise easily, their nails are soft, they're bleeding gums, they're twitching muscles, they're just on and on and on. But they claim to be healthy. All they have is a back problem. And we need to learn how to understand this owner's manual and listen to the clues, the red flags that our body is throwing up and waving, and say, hey, this hurts, this is inflamed, I have diarrhea, I'm coughing, I'm sweating, I'm doing whatever. What does that mean, and what is the body trying to do? So the average person in America roughly eats in excess of 200 pounds of sugar per person per year. And in the 1980s, people ate less than 12 pounds of sugar per person per year. 55 pounds of fats and oils, over 300 cans of soft drinks, 50 pounds of cakes, cookies, and 20 gallons of ice cream. This is what we're building ourselves. And, this is my point. We're not having drug deficiencies, but we're so sick and so diseased, and we wonder why. He's like, well, I just want to go to the doctor and I'll get my pill that is going to hopefully mask what this is doing to me. Eating like this year after year after year after year. And, it's not always an easy process. People like to just go get one pill and keep eating crap and not living a robust lifestyle where they're exercising and getting out and moving their body. It takes a lot more for somebody to go out and buy organic food and prepare and plan their diet and get out and exercise and to do the things that they need to, and not eating all of this stuff. Certainly this is an easy way of lifestyle. It tastes good, it's fun, it doesn't take a lot of energy, but ultimately you do that over several decades, you get to the point where you're 60 and 70 and 80 years old, and you're wondering, well, oh man, I got sick all of a sudden. It wasn't something that was all of a sudden. We've been building this up for years and years and years as a result. And then they want something that's going to get them better in the next 3 days. It just doesn't work that way. There's another great example for you. About 100 years ago, heart attacks were practically unheard of in the United States, but people 100 years ago also ate more or less fresh whole foods. Now, that might have been an issue whether you were eating or not, but if you were eating, largely it was organic food. Back then, and now they say that you would need roughly 80 cups of spinach grown in today's soils to reach the nutrient content of 1 cup of spinach 100 years ago. Think of that for a minute. And who's ever sat down and ate 80 cups of spinach? And how nutritionally deficient, even spinach in this case, is. And that just points to, these days we're going to actually talk about our soils and how deficient our nutritional values are in our soils, which unfortunately I want people to have as much of their nutrition from food as possible, but even organically grown stuff, it being so deficient in nutrition these days, it requires some supplementation, in my opinion, to have the level of health that we all hope for. Okay. So, getting to our unhealthy soils, long-term deprivation of but a microscopic quantity of one essential nutrient in our diets alters the precise and vital balance of the body's chemicals. Ultimately, this results in symptoms that are the precursors to chronic or fatal disease. While farmers in centuries past were forced to let dead fields lie fallow until the combined efforts of wildlife, rotting plants return their fertility, modern farming technology allows us to ignore the symptoms of soil exhaustion. We can now force food to grow when it never would have grown in the past. And at what cost? That's the point. We can physically put food on your plate, but does it have much or anything of value to feed your body? Today's high-tech farmers continue to douse the lands with antibiotics, toxic chemicals that force green plants to grow against the will of the sickened Mother Earth. A lot of people don't, I actually didn't realize this either, but in Ethiopia, it used to be massively forested. But because of the lack of topsoil brought about by massive deforestation, at the turn of the century, 90% of Ethiopia's land that was covered by forests. And less than a century later, not 5% of that rainforest remains. And what largely happens when you wipe out 90 to 95% of a forested area is that root system isn't going to be able to hold the water basin up anymore. And because of easy profits, they cut it down. We've got wood, we've got, we're using these natural resources up, and we can't hold water into the basins the way that it's supposed to. The dirt's going to be carried away off the hillsides, and now we have Ethiopia what it is today. And it's one of the largest places of famine in the world. Very, very little topsoil that's worth anything. And we can't keep the water table high enough to grow anything because those deep root systems aren't even there anymore. We just said this one. So we'll come back to America. In Iowa, topsoils that were once a foot deep, 12 inches, today are less than 6 inches deep. And it doesn't sound like a lot. 6 inches can be devastating. According to the United States Department of Agriculture, estimates that a 6-inch loss of topsoil, such as that in the current one in the southern Piedmont, it's capable of reducing crop yields by 40% per year. Geologists say there are 58 million square miles of land surface on the earth, but only 10 million square miles of this can be farmed. It takes about 2 acres of land to feed one person per year. So right now, what that basically, we have about 1 acre per person per year is what we have available. And there's a lot of reasons why people are going to bed nutritionally starving themselves to death, but this is certainly adding to that piece of the puzzle. More than half of the agricultural land of the United States has been severely eroded and farmed incorrectly. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, again, of our current 421 million acres of protected farmlands, 97 million acres are eroding at more than twice the tolerance level, the level at which soil can be replaced naturally. Another 89 million acres are eroding at 1 to 2 times the tolerance level. In all, 40% of our farmlands are losing topsoil. And what does that mean? That means that, 1, we're not able to make as much food, and 2, the food that's being made is nutritionally devoid on a significant level. Just an ecologist, Gene Logston, a quote that he had: "The fall of most every civilization is largely on account of raping natural resources until their easy profits goes out of them. By the 1930s, most of the cream had been skimmed off of American soils, and diminished crops of mineral-deficient vegetables, fruits, and grains began to appear. Interestingly, in and around this time is when chronic degenerative diseases began to pop up and escalate, as well as, arthritis, diabetes, cancers, lupus, osteoporosis, dental caries. All of these things, they overlap almost perfectly with the processing and refining of our foods, and with our significant decrease in nutritional content because of what's going on in our soils. And many people, they go to the doctor, they'll get blood work, and they're told everything looks normal. And that's one problem with normal blood work, is that it takes a lot for the body to be sick enough for something to show up in the blood. For example, liver enzymes. Your liver has to be so sick and so diseased that the cells are dying, they're breaking open, and now their enzymes are in your bloodstream and they can now be measured. But that's not the time you want to find out that something's gone wrong and that your liver is not functioning at 100%, which is why that there's some other functional type tests, and there's some other things that we could look at as far as red flags in the body that are going to tell us that there's problems way before our blood work will even do. And there's 2 different books I want to talk about for a second. One is called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. This was written by Dr. Price. He's actually a dentist. And back in the 1920s and 30s, he had traveled around the world, and his major goal was to try to find societies in areas that they were not inflicted with the heart disease and diabetes and cancers and just the Western diseases, basically. And, largely one of the big things that he focused on too would be being a dentist, as he was looking at tooth structure and what was going on with their teeth, their jaw structure, and their health in general. And every single time that one of those societies had been introduced to a more Western type of a diet is when you start seeing tooth decay go up significantly, degenerative diseases go up significantly, people's teeth started coming in all over the place, needing orthodontics on a larger scale. Amazing book. A lot of pictures of all of these different people before and after having been introduced to that Western lifestyle. But these people were people that were not afflicted with heart disease and cancers and diabetes on any scale whatsoever. And there were 13 different societies around the world. So it's a great book, and we'll cover some of the major points that were actually familiar among every single one of them that didn't have these diseases. We'll get into that in just a minute. And one other great book was something called Pottinger's Cats. Dr. Pottinger was a second-generation medical doctor. He was an endocrinologist back in the 20s and 30s, and he actually meant to continue on his father's work with tuberculosis, and it turned into doing some amazing studies with cats. He had thousands and thousands of cats, and I'm going to kind of narrow it all down to some of the big things that he found. Was that ultimately when he had two major groups of cats, and a lot of this had to be because he had to find ways of feeding these cats that was a way that they could do efficiently and not break the budget. But there was a group that ate more whole food, raw meat scraps, things that weren't cooked, things that weren't, altered in any real major way. And then there was the group that ultimately had some level of, pasteurization or homogenation of milk, all the way to, they've got skim milk. So you've taken off a lot of nutrition at that point. Evaporated condensed milk, all different types of milks, different types of cooked food. So largely we've got these two major different groups of cats ultimately. And, very quickly you even see in the very first generation that the group that was much higher in the amount of sugar and processed food, they're almost like ADHD children. They're pacing all over the place. They're not acting normal. They're not sleeping well. But what's actually really interesting is when they get to second generation now, where they continue on eating the diets that they had, second generation, they actually documented the first case of asthma in a cat ever. Very interesting. After each group dies from generation to generation, they measure their mineral content, their bone density, and in the process refined group, from generation to generation, their bone density got lower and lower, literally to the point where in the third generation, a lot of their sutures were no longer forming together. Their bones were very, very brittle in third generation. A lot of even births had, the kittens were having broken limbs just from the birth experience themselves. They were breaking very easily. Second generation, where a cat normally, if you were to toss a cat, they'd be very, very able to land on their paws. They can control their body very well, very agile creatures. And even into second generation, you toss a cat and you can watch it. They've got video footage of this where they're kind of landing on their side. They're becoming less stable. They just don't have that agility anymore and that kind of control. And certainly by third generation, when they're having breaks very easily, they're very ataxic, meaning that their balance is terrible compared to the group that's eating the non-processed food side of things, and they're just living like cats. They're not having any of these same types of problems. And what was really interesting is fourth generation. Third generation cats had no libido whatsoever. And if they could get them to mate, which is a really big issue, every fourth generation cat was a stillborn. They never had a live fourth generation. which is really interesting when you look at it from the perspective of fourth generation with cats. How many generations it's been since we've gone from significantly processing and refining our foods. And, you know, you get to people in and around my age, or a decade even younger than me, how many people are having problems with infertility, with having spontaneous abortions, meaning the body, they can't sustain the pregnancy on their own, not that they did it on purpose. So miscarriages, another word for it. So people are having miscarriages or having infertility issues rampantly, more than we've seen in history. And more or less that would be considered third, fourth generation, fifth generation, since we've been massively processing and refining foods. Is there a correlation there? I certainly think so. But one of the beautiful things is that they actually were even able to take third generation cats and nurse them back to health with good nutrition and get them to mate, get them to go on and have offspring that would 2 or 3 generations down the road be generally just as healthy as now the other group that had always been eating non-processed foods, which is good for us as humans because we're incredibly resilient, and doing a lot of the wrong thing for a lot of years, we can actually still come back from. And that's a good thing. There's some hope. I've got a lot of dreary stories and things that don't sound really good and sound all negative, but there's really light at the end of the tunnel, and we can add a lot of nutritional value and a lot of health back to our lives. So there were 11 major characteristics that Dr. Price had found when he went to those different societies. I'm just going to go through those here for you. So I'll be reading them a little bit more. So the diets of healthy, non-industrialized peoples contained no refined or denatured foods, such as refined sugar or high fructose corn syrup, white flour, canned foods, pasteurized, homogenized, skim or low-fat milk, refined or hydrogenated vegetable oils, protein powders, artificial vitamins, or toxic additives or colorings. Okay. All traditional cultures consumed some sort of animal food, such as fish and other seafood, water and land fowl, land and sea mammals, eggs, milk and milk products, reptiles, and insects. The entire animal was consumed, muscles, organs, bones, and fat. They would even make soups. People do it today, just not as much as they used to, where they put the bones into soups and get that gelatin-rich nutrients there that are phenomenal. There's so many different benefits for doing something like that. Number 4, in all traditional cultures, some animal products were eaten raw. Primitive and traditional diets have a high food enzyme content from raw dairy products, raw meat and fish, raw honey, tropical fruits, cold-pressed oils, wine, and unpasteurized beer, naturally preserved lacto-fermented vegetables, fruits, beverages, dairy products, meats, and condiments. Seeds, grains, and nuts are soaked, sprouted, and fermented or naturally leavened to neutralize the anti-nutrients such as enzyme inhibitors like tannins and phytic acid. Total fat content of traditional diets varies from 30% to 80% of their entire diet. 80%, and that would actually go along the lines more of a ketogenic type of a diet. Calories, but only 4% of those calories coming from polyunsaturated oils naturally occurring in grains, legumes, nuts, fish, animal fats, and vegetables. Balance of these fats, calories from saturated and monounsaturated fatty acids. Number 8, traditional diets contain nearly equal amounts of omega-6 and omega-3s. That's not what's going on. We're probably in America doing about 99% omega-6 and 1% omega-3, if at all. These traditional fats have nourished healthy people for thousands of years. Butter, tallow, and suet from beef and lamb, lard from pigs, chicken, goose, and duck fat, coconut, palm, and sesame oils, cold-pressed olive oil and cold-pressed flaxseed oil, and marine oils are fish oils. All traditional diets contain some salt in the diet. All traditional cultures make use of animal bones, usually in the form of gelatin-rich meat broths. And number 11, traditional cultures make provisions for the health of the future generations by providing special nutrient-rich foods for parents-to-be. So not only do they eat incredibly healthy food to begin with, they make sure that when people are going to be in and around the ages of being able to produce offspring, that they're getting the best of the best, which is going to allow the succession of the species to be as positive as possible. They're going to have the most robust terrain, the healthiest individuals, and that's how they can make sure that their societies are able to continue on. So reading labels and some points, some different things to live by that will make, and just in general terms, obviously on a patient by patient basis, we can get really, really specific, but just some general things that can go a really long way to kind of incorporate that 2% rule, a little bit of changes here and there that can make a really big difference in your health. Don't eat anything you can't pronounce, first of all. Largely, most of those are going to be chemicals and not things that we want to put in our body in the first place. Never buy anything with monosodium glutamate in it. If you're not convinced, great book, Excitotoxins, The Taste That Kills. MSG is an excitotoxin. People get plenty of MSG in their diet. Sometimes they don't even realize it. And when you have an excitotoxin, meaning exciting, that it excites the body and it drives it and drives it and drives it. And imagine trying to sleep like that. Or imagine what happens if you kept driving your car and driving it and driving it and driving it, and you never filled it up with gas or oil or any new parts along the way and drive it into the ground. Excitotoxins are just going to drive the body constantly. Aspartame, it's also another excitotoxin. It makes you fat, it makes you hungry, it makes you depressed, and it leads to all types of medical conditions, including PMS, migraines. There's a great book called Aspartame, Is It Safe? It ultimately, when it's broken down by the liver, it's going to turn into formaldehyde. And if you don't know what formaldehyde is, you can go into any gross anatomy lab. That's what's going to preserve a lot of the bodies there. So we can potentially preserve our bodies, chemically speaking, but it won't be very healthy at all. High fructose corn syrup, despite the commercials that say a little bit's okay for you, it's not going to add to your health in any way. It's highly chemical, physically addicting, makes you fat, and believed by many to be one of the leading causes of both cancer and diabetes in today's world. Hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oils are written on a label, then certainly don't buy that. We've talked about hydrogenated oils already. Harvard says that it kills between 30,000 and 100,000 people a year just from these hydrogenated oils to begin with. Number 6, the sugar used in processing is the most refined white powder that you can imagine. So, trying to get rid of the white sugar, the, processed white breads. And there's a reason why white bread can sit on a shelf for 2 weeks and not turn all green, because there's no nutrition there. Bacteria don't even want to eat it. But if you had a real loaf of bread where you just ground down the grain and you made it, within a couple of days, if you don't keep it refrigerated, even with it being refrigerated, it'll turn green within a few days because there's a lot of nutrition there. And that's what we're looking for. And this is the point, white sugar versus raw sugar. On the right-hand side, it has vitamin content in it versus white sugar is going to have pretty much next to nothing. Number 7, if it says natural or artificial flavors on the label, know that somewhere some food lobbyists have gone to magnificent job, of allowing the food industry to lie and deceive the public. There are thousands of man-made chemicals that are put into food to make you hungry, make you physically addicted, and to make you fat. There are also put into food to make it last for years without spoiling and make it so incredibly appealing to the taste buds that you can't stop eating it. Much of the food in today's high-tech processing loses most of its nutritional value, is energetically altered, and virtually tastes like nothing. Food manufacturers then must add chemicals to make the food taste like something that you would actually eat. Number 8, spices sound wonderful and healthy, but a lot of them are not. The food industry has lobbied Congress to pass legislation allowing chemicals to be called spices, and this is the distinction. Turmeric, great. A lot of the chemicals that they throw into the entire pot of what's allowed to be called spices, not so much. They're not spices at all. They're man-made deadly chemicals. But legally, they can be called spices in this huge group of chemicals. So that's really important to keep in mind. Stay away from artificially colored and dyes at all costs. A lot of problems there. Palm oil is a deadly oil. A lot of good ones. Palm oil is not a great one for us. And things like dextrose, sucrose, and fructose are chemically man-made sweeteners. Stay away from those. Sucralose and Splenda are the newest, hottest man-made chemical sweeteners. Its purpose was so that food industry could capitalize on the low carbohydrate craze and still taste really sweet. But some of these sweeteners are hundreds of times sweeter than natural table sugar, cane sugar, and can be significantly more addictive. So there's a lot of problems with that. Remember, stripped down white flour or bleached flour has virtually no fiber. It's been deleted and depleted from nutritional value and is produced in a highly chemical environment. It's actually turned into such a highly refined product that it has many of the same properties as drugs in terms of how the body physically reacts when it's ingested. Soy protein isolate is a common ingredient in protein shakes and protein food bars. Soy is not the health food that everybody makes it out to be. It's actually can be quite dangerous. Processing soy protein isolate, hexane is often used, which is a petroleum solvent similar to gasoline. Certainly these chemicals or residues of these chemicals remain in the food and never listed on the label. So important to keep some of those things in mind. Probiotics. I'm going to weekend-long lectures just on probiotics. I had the pleasure of listening to one of the people who are kind of considered one of the world's leaders in the world of probiotics. And yeah, taking probiotics themselves have their own benefits from an immune standpoint and nutrition in the body. But there's a whole process is involved where you've got, think of your gut like a parking lot. All those parking spots are already filled up with something. Hopefully, mostly good bacteria. For a lot of people that eat junk, a lot of it is pretty lousy bacteria. And when you take a probiotic, they're kind of like driving through looking for a spot. And for the most part, they're not really finding a spot where they can build a colony or park their car, if you will. So there's a more protocol-based thing where you're actually trying to kill off some of the bad stuff to open up some car spots and then allow some of the good bacteria to come in and allow it to flourish and to take over and build colonies and to actually have that be as healthy as possible. So there's a lot involved with it. Probiotics are certainly on the higher end of the list. Things like fish oil that we talked about as far as recommendations. There's a lot of probiotics that are specific for different things, a lot of ways of going about it. Again, we're being a little bit general here, but certainly something to be important in the diet. We destroy the good bacteria in our diet, doing a lot of different things. We've got foods that'll disturb our acid-alkaline imbalance. Not even being breastfed, there's a lot of good bacteria that comes from doing that. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, chlorine in our drinking water. We know, why do you put chlorine in a pool? Why do you put it in drinking water? Because it kills bacteria. And when we ingest it, it's going to kill stuff inside our body too. Radiation and chemotherapy, which we're exposed to all the time. Even just with the sun, we're getting a radiation exposure. You got your microwave going, you're getting radiation exposure. You got your cell phone, we're getting radiation exposure all the time. Virtually all meat, chicken, and dairy that is not organic are loaded with antibiotics, which destroys all the good bacteria too. Just because they had antibiotics, that it doesn't just disappear once it gets into their body. And now we're taking in those antibiotics and creating more drug resistance. We also have these animals that are pumped full of growth hormone and estrogens. And what are those hormones meant to do? It's meant to get them really big and fat so that you can make a lot of money when they end up slaughtering these animals. And guess what? Just when you put estrogen into an animal, it doesn't just disappear once you've killed the animal, right? And we're taking those in. And, estrogens will do a lot of different things. For women, estrogens will cause early onset of puberty. They'll develop breasts earlier, they'll develop their period, and they'll end up, the lining of their uterus is going to grow faster and faster with all this extra estrogen that's coming in. So you'll get heavier bleeding, more clots, more cysts, leading to ultimately problems with endometriosis or cancers. And then on a men's side, we have some estrogen in our body, but when we're getting bombarded with massive amounts of estrogen coming in from a dietary source especially, and we're not breaking it down because our livers aren't working so hot these days, it leads to a lot of obesity issues. and will just really create massive discrepancies in our estrogen testosterone balance. And for a guy, you don't want estrogen taking over. You want your testosterone doing what it's supposed to be doing. And so that creates a big problem for everybody across the board. So anyway, continuing, diets high in meats and fats, constipation, cigarettes, alcohol, and stress, and medicinal antibiotics, or all of these things are going to destroy a lot of the good bacteria in our gut. So good bacteria, they're going to do a lot of things for us. It's going to basically make our terrain in our gut strong, helps us with not getting sick. And there's a lot of, depending on the research that you look at, 50, 60, 70% of our immune system is actually in our gut. It's called gut-associated lymphoid tissue that we have there. So the healthier our gut, the stronger our terrain, and the more capable we are of dealing with everything that's coming at us, whether it's the simple flu or COVID or some GI bug. We're just more capable of handling it. Experience lower cholesterol levels, inhibition of cancer, protecting against food poisoning, protection against stomach ulcers, helps you deal better with lactose, enhanced immunity, protecting you against harmful bacteria, viruses, funguses, protectful against candida and vaginal yeast issues, prevention of constipation, diarrhea, inflammatory bowel diseases, and just really the list goes on and on. There's a lot of benefits. Big bang for the buck, basically, for that. There are protocols that people use that are absolutely massive doses. You kind of want to start small because there's going to be a die-off. And a die-off of bacteria will not be the most fun thing in the world. You spend some time in the bathroom. You can be anything from mild flu-like symptoms on up to, oh my God, this doctor's trying to kill me. Honestly. So, you start out a little bit slow and you can build things up, but ultimately building that terrain is an incredibly powerful tool for your health. Enzymes, they can go an incredibly long way. Think about eating bread, white bread with nothing in it, no nutritional value whatsoever, no enzymes either. So now your body has to use 100% of its own energy from enzymes from the pancreas and from enzymes within the stomach and hydrochloric acid in the stomach to break this down 100% by itself. It's a lot to ask of the body to do, times every single meal that we eat, versus eating a food like, you got some spinach, or you've got, your apple that you're eating raw. There's naturally enzymes there that are helping to digest itself. That's why they go bad so quickly. They bruise quickly and easily. They start digesting themselves on top of the bacteria trying to take over because there's real life there. Enzymes basically equals life. We want to make sure that we've got plenty of enzymes coming in. We can even support that nutritionally and take on extra enzymes to help us digesting our food, get the most nutrition out of our food. Because even eating perfect food, if you don't digest it very well, which is a long process. I'm going to actually switch over for 2 seconds. Bear with me. This is a long process that we have to go. We have to start off in the mouth. Got our teeth. Digestion 101. We have to chew our food. Most people don't do that very well. We're ninja eating. We're on the go. We have to scarf down food in a matter of 30 seconds. So, just starting off chewing our food better is going to go a long way. Then food's got to come down into our stomach. And we need enough zinc. Well, if you're eating a lot of processed refined food, then you can cross that off. We don't have enough zinc. We need B vitamins. Well, if you're eating processed refined foods, you're not getting that to ultimately be able to make enough hydrochloric acid. So if we're not making enough hydrochloric acid, then that's going to affect the way that we're digesting food. And if it's sitting in here, not being digested and ultimately moved quickly, what happens? We have carbohydrates in there. What happens if carbs are in a warm, moist tube? Ferments. You get fermentation. And those acids will blow back up and get acid reflux issues and create a lot of problems. We want this digesting so fast. And what's the first thing that people do when they start having acid reflux? They take an antacid. So they want to shut down all the acid here, which is going to slow down digestion even more and not allow you to absorb all sorts of nutrients. Fats will putrefy, proteins will putrefy, fats will go rancid, sitting in here, and that's going to create a load of issues and ultimately not allow nutrition to continue on through our small intestine, get absorbed into our bloodstream, and actually be utilized. All right? So you could eat even all the right foods in the world. If it's not being digested and broken down enough, and it's not getting to your small intestine, and it's not going into the blood, and then it's not going into our cells, there's a lot of things that have to take place for the nutrition to be able to actually do something for you. Digestion is very important, and that will go a long, long way for you with enzymes for sure. Let's skip through a few here. I want to make sure that we're kind of on time. Real quick, as far as water is concerned, great book. It's called The Body's Many Cries for Water. There's a medical doctor. He's a prisoner of war. And some of the guards found out that he was a doctor. And the guard came up. He's like, "Doc, my gut hurts. What do I do?" He's like, "I don't know. Go drink some water." And he comes back. He's like, "Helped a little. Go drink more." And he drinks more. And he comes like, "Oh, thanks, Doc. That actually really helped." He's like, "Whatever." So the next guard comes along and has another problem. He's like, building a referral practice in jail is crazy. But all he had to work with was this dirty, nasty, disgusting water that he had nothing else available. And he's telling everybody, you drink water, drink water, drink water. And at some point, he's like, this can't all be placebo. The number of people that are coming back saying, "Oh, thank you. This really helped me so much." You'd be surprised, since, 90-something% of our body is water. We don't really take that to heart and realize how much hydrating ourselves properly will add to our overall level of health. That's an important one. Let's see. I'm not going to. These two are pretty good. Keep in mind that the maximum contamination levels, that's what the water districts are supposed to adhere to. This is legally what we're supposed to have. They in no way come close to the safety standards established by the U.S. government's Safe Water Drinking Act. On average, drinking water in the United States currently contains over 2,100 toxic chemicals that are known to cause cancer, cell mutation, and nervous disorders. It's not particularly surprising, considering that there are close to 100,000 chemicals now in everyday use, with over 1,000 new ones being added each year. In fact, according to the EPA, U.S. industries generate some 79 million pounds of toxic waste each year that's not disposed of properly. Guess where that ends up? What's probably more surprising is the fact that, according to the EPA, 53 million Americans unknowingly drink tap water that is polluted with feces, radiation, or contaminants. Also, according to the EPA, this isn't some, group of people that are just trying to make noise and that don't have, this is not a doctor or this person. This is from our EPA, saying that some 45 million people drink water polluted with the parasite Cryptosporidium that killed more than 100 people in Milwaukee in 1993, or that over half of all Americans drink water that has been used at least once before. Each year, at least 400,000 cases of illnesses can be attributed to contaminated water. So, in this case, we need to chlorinate our water. They need to do what they need to do to treat it, and it's still going to show up at our house and not be ideal. So really, a lot of the ultimate true filtration is something that I think that people need to do at the household level. There's a lot of ways about going to do that. We can talk about some of that on a more individualized basis and what people want to do, but there's just a lot of important pieces. But even little things like chlorine and bathing. The amount of chlorine in our water, a 15-minute shower, you can save all of the chlorine and filtering at your tap water that you're going to drink. But, a 15-minute shower, when you've got hot chlorine, it's basically going to turn to chloroform. And if you remember in the movies, when somebody dips a rag in chloroform and puts it over their mouth and knocks them out. Excuse me, that's largely what's taking place with a really hot shower when you're not taking care of the chlorine. So in our last 20 minutes, might not even take quite that long, but I want to talk about a few different things. We're going to get into some genetic testing. It doesn't matter the gene SNP, what it's called, but just how it could benefit from a long-term perspective, as opposed to something like hormone testing, where normally you would test a hormone and you would do whatever you're going to do from a treatment perspective, and then you'd have to retest those hormone things maybe 1, 2, 3 times, as you're going down the road. Genetic testing is nice in the sense that your genes don't change largely. So you're going to get that done, and that's going to benefit you. That information will benefit you for the rest of your life. And we'll see some examples of where that is. Dutch hormone testing is probably the most in-depth hormone testing that somebody could do. It's a combination of both urine and saliva testing, actually. And you're going to see some tremendous things that you just aren't going to see when you're doing just a basic hormone look at things from a blood perspective. So there's great information there. Organic acids profiles, just to give you kind of a real basic idea of some of these more advanced tests. Let's say that we have a cell, okay? And in this cell, we're gonna say we've got glucose, sugar. We need insulin to bring it into the cell. We go through this long process that we learned in biology class called glycolysis. Okay, and then we're going to form, ultimately, pyruvate. That pyruvate is going to come over to our mitochondria, becomes acetyl coenzyme A, and in the mitochondria, there's going to be this process. We're going to make this a circular process, and this is going on inside the mitochondria, and this is called the Krebs cycle. Okay? In the Krebs cycle, there are tons of steps along the way. We don't need to worry about all the names of them at this point. But when we're doing advanced testing, if you've got a step here where we're building up a lot of this, and we have almost none of the very next step over here, why are we not making this step? Okay, well, when you're doing organic acids testing, or you're doing some of the most advanced testing that you're looking at every single step times hundreds of biochemical processes taking place in the body, much more in depth than your basic blood work is going to be looking at, which is one of the really amazing benefits there. But while I've got this drawn here, this is a great last manual point for your body as well. When you go down this process of glycolysis, form your pyruvate, you need to get to the mitochondria oxygen, and a lot of people aren't doing that very well. They kind of sniff the air as opposed to breathing it. You need B vitamins, you need your fish oil, you need a lot of nutrients to be able to go this direction. And if you don't have enough of these because you've eaten too much refined and processed food, and you're not exercising, and you're not breathing very well, then you're not going to go this way into the mitochondria. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you end up with 36 ATP. If you go that direction, that's a lot of energy. 36 ATP, that's your gasoline. You just filled up your tank. That's what we want to do. If you don't go that way, your only other option is to go the way without oxygen, which is called the lactic acid pathway. And that makes 2 ATP. Imagine the difference of these two people and what their energy levels are going to feel like. Imagine the last time that you worked out hard enough to build up lactic acid in the body. Imagine if this is how you're running every biochemical process for making energy all day long, every day, because you don't have the nutrients to go through the oxygen direction. It's called aerobic respiration. If you can't go this way, you're going this way, making a lot of lactic acid. Well, guess what these people feel like all the time? They're tired and they freaking hurt. Lactic acid building up in your body, that's miserable. And they wonder why they're diagnosed with anything from some kind of a hyperactivity disorder to fibromyalgia to just chronically everything hurts all the time. You know, a combination of this and a combination of that last big pathway that we talked about with the prostaglandin and inflammatory pathways going on, all of them breaking down all at once. And we wonder, like, oh, they've got this chronic disease. Oh man, that's really unlucky. Well, it's not so much an unlucky thing most of the time. You know, there are, any disease, I would argue, is going to be a big puzzle. And, you know, it's not just going to be, let me take care of this one little piece of the puzzle, and it's going to take care of 60 years of chronic destruction of the body and all of these processes going down the tubes. I'm going to do an entire seminar just on Alzheimer's alone. There's an amazing doctor who's doing some phenomenal things as far as reversing people that have been diagnosed and actually very low on the dementia scale. 30 is the best score that you could have on the Montreal Cognitive Assessment Test, and even people that are down near 10. I mean, you get 26 and below, you're actually diagnosed with dementia. So we're talking about people in the lower teens even on this scale that are able to completely come back to normal. And it's not because he has one single treatment that's going to be, he's measuring 40 different markers, 40 different major functional processes going on in the body, and saying, well, you know, for this person, these 23 are absolutely horrible. We need to address these 23 things. And for this person, these 3 things need to be addressed. And for this person, all 40 need to be addressed. And when you do that, amazing things happen. But you're working on a much grander scale than just the simple pop one pill, the miracle pill that, you know, somebody's hoping is just going to fix all of these processes going on in the body. So with that being said, a little bit of advanced testing, some of them genetic markers. We already talked about the first one, 9p21. This is how tough are your arteries. Are they like titanium, or do you have tissue paper for arteries? It's a good thing to know, because if you have 4 copies of this gene, then you need to be so massively, you know, everybody needs to be conscious of the amount of inflammation going on in the arteries and the sugar and the insulin. But these people need to be 10 times more diligent, or they're just, we know where they're going from a cardiovascular standpoint. ApoE4 is there's a couple of different forms. There's the ApoE3, there's 4, there's 2. What you don't want is the 4 version, a copy from mom and dad. Is about 80% likelihood of developing Alzheimer's. 1 copy of the 4 gene, you're probably in the 20-30% range likelihood of developing Alzheimer's. From a genetic standpoint, all can be addressed. You don't have to go down this road. It's a lot of people actually are starting to rename Alzheimer's diabetes type 3. Because of this, the chronic degenerative and inflammatory stuff going on in the body. AME1 has to do with amylase and breaking down sugar in the mouth and having a proper sugar response. There's genetic markers that are looking at your metabolic rate and how well you're able to burn fat and keep your temperature up. There's genes that we look at that have to do with vitamin A and their ability to activate, and helps a lot with both your liver. From a liver perspective, it helps with night vision. There's genes that have to do with activating vitamin D and transporting it throughout the body. And you could have, again, entire week-long lectures just on vitamin D and the number of the things that it does for the body. We normally think about it from a calcium standpoint and an absorption standpoint, but it's actually very hormone-like in the body, very important. Other genes that have to deal with how hungry that you feel on a regular basis. We've got genes that, how well you can handle lactose sugar from milk, how well you can shuttle vitamin C around the body. And one of my favorites that I like to look at, because it's just so important on a health level for somebody, is the FUT2 gene. Has to do with if your body can make intrinsic factor. And if your body is very inefficient at making intrinsic factor, you've got almost no chance of absorbing B12. It doesn't matter if you take buckets of this stuff, you're just not going to be able to absorb it, which isn't impossible to get around. You don't have to go in through the gut. You could either get something that's going to be sublingual, you could do a shot, or you can take B12 with intrinsic factor to totally bypass the fact that genetically you can't make intrinsic factor very well. So the cool thing about a lot of these genetic markers is, even though that, oh, it's frustrating, this is against me, there's a workaround, and we could do some things with that. One of my favorites, one of the most important for people to know, is the SHMT1. These days in the nutritional world, you want to activate nutrition. And to activate nutrition, you need methyl groups. Methyl is CH3. You want methyl B12 and methyl B9 and methylate, everything you could possibly methylate to make it active. And there are nutritionists that will just give all these active methyl donors, methyl, methyl, methyl. But there are some people, if you have the naughty version of this gene, if you will, you're going to take those methyl groups. It's going to penetrate through the nucleus and actually cause genetic damage. So well-intentioned people that think that they're doing some tremendous thing and doing kind of some guesswork and just methylating everybody, you don't want to cause genetic damage. That's not the direction that you want to go. So again, very important information. And then we've got the MTHFR is probably the one that patients know the most. It has to do with activating vitamin B9 into its active form. Very important. And then the MTRR gene, there's this whole pathway where we're going to be breaking down, and it's a normal process where we create homocysteine. Homocysteine is a cardiac marker, and we need to be able to break down homocysteine. And the way to do that is largely with an activated form of B12. And if you can't reactivate it and cause methyl B12 all over again, then again, you're getting hit from both sides. You can't absorb it in your gut, and now you can't reactivate it through these pathways with the MTRR gene, which again, we can get around, but it's really important to know. COM genes have to do with breakdown of neurotransmitters largely. If you've got enough dopamine in the brain and you generally can feel happy and kind of lighthearted and not having much of a problem, or if you break down dopamine so quickly that you're just a miserable SOB all day, well, that's good to know and something that could be addressed. Or if you're somebody that is constantly pumping out adrenaline and you're not breaking that down very well. Another one, BDNF, is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It has to do with how well your brain can learn, how well it can come back from a concussion or an injury. All things that can be very important from a treatment standpoint. So I'm going to show you a couple of different graphs here, and I like the way that this does this graphically. I want you to think of these like stop signs, the stoplights. Red light means that the process is going to happen maybe and very slowly. Yellow is middle of the road, and green is we're good to go. So I'm going to pull up my annotation thing here for a second. Okay, so first step, I want you to see cholesterol is the starting place of all hormones. This is your hormone pathways, and it all starts with cholesterol. Every single other thing here requires cholesterol to get to. We get to our progesterones, and cortisol is a first stop. It's your stress handling hormone, and actually, if you get way too much of it, create a lot of problems with obesity. And we're going to continue on across these pathways. If you do this very efficiently, you're going to ultimately get to testosterone, right? Testosterone. Everybody, men, women, everybody does this, getting to testosterone. And what happens from here? Well, from testosterone, I'm not going to get into all the different pathways. The ones that are the most important for the moment and the gene, these are all gene related. The important one is what's going to happen. All testosterone eventually is going to convert into estrogens, more or less, okay? And do we do this very quickly or do we do this very slowly, all right? Now, if you're a guy, you'd actually rather have a slower version of this gene so that we can stay at testosterone. That would be a great thing. If you're a woman, you kind of don't want this slow. Building up extra testosterone, you're going to have polycystic ovarian syndrome type problems. You're going to have issues where you're going to have more facial hair. Just not a great situation. You want some testosterone, just not blocked here. But if you go the opposite direction, if you're a very, very fast converter into estrogen, all right, this could be a really, really big problem for you from a heavy bleeding standpoint, clot, cysts, and it can get compounded even worse later down the road. And if you are a slow converter, I'm sorry, block that out. Let me get my eraser here. If you are a fast converter of testosterone into estrogen, and you're eating a lot of those animal products like your beef and your chicken that are just loaded with estrogens that fattened them up, and you're on birth control pill and you're getting more estrogens, you kind of get the point where people's estrogen levels that should have been low, like a female, and it raises later in their cycle to allow the growth of the uterine lining, they're not starting their period anymore down here. They're starting with their estrogen levels here and going up even higher, creating a ton of hormonal issues for these people. Again, we're going to do a whole seminar just on female hormones, but just to kind of get a look at some things from a genetic standpoint and some of the things that we look at. Next, once we get to, let me get my annotation here again. Once we get to estrogen, from that last step, we continue on. There's 3 directions we can go. You want to go the 2-hydroxy route, and 4-hydroxy and 16-hydroxy are not good. These are cancer causing. They're metabolites and breakdown of estrogen that is not a good thing. And if you are a male or female who gets to estrogen and you are really bad at doing this, which is kind of common, and you're really good at doing these, your likelihood of creating estrogen problems and cancer issues and just everything, it compounds itself significantly. You want to know where you are so that you know how to be able to break this down effectively. Erase these. And then we get to the very next step. So we ended up with our 2, 4, and 16-hydroxy from the last step. We want to know, how do we pee this stuff out? How do we eliminate it? All right. What we want to do, that is that COMT gene. We want to be able to break it down very effectively. Our livers work exactly how we want it to. This is the best possible option. And it's not always going to happen for a lot of people. But there's 2 other options that people a lot of times can be backups to. There's glutathione and there's superoxide dismutase, to be able to continue to be able to break these things down all the way to be able to eliminate it instead of being built up and create an estrogen dominant type of an effect in the body. And, glutathione is unfortunately one of those things you can't supplement the normal way. There are potentials for patches, IVs, nutritional IVs that we do in the office is probably one of the best ways to be able to get glutathione, bigger doses of that up, because it's just one of those things that stomach acid destroys too quickly for us to be able to get any real benefit from it, from that perspective. So there is that. And close. All right, we are just about finishing up here. Let me get my eraser and get rid of these last couple of lines here. I have a gift for everybody that's sticking around long enough to listen through everything. If anybody wants to come in as a new patient that's not already a patient, you can use this code here, NP50 Nutrition. Just put it in online the online scheduler, and that'll give you a 50% discount. It's good until September 3rd. Just at the website, you can go to just thewellnesscny.com, and there'll be links to get you to the booking area, or you can put in the whole thing, wellnesscny.com/booking, and you can do that. I'm going to get out of that mode for a moment and see if I can go back to stop sharing my screen. Let's see here, chat. I've got, all right. We're just about at our 10 o'clock. So I got through everything that I wanted. If anybody has any specific questions or thoughts, whether you want to use the chat function on here, type something in, or if they want to unmute themselves and they want to ask the question, you're more than welcome to do that. Somebody down here says, my cholesterol is very high, but I have no coronary or carotid artery blockages. That's the way. If you don't have a diet high in refined and processed crap, if your arteries aren't inflamed and going to be bleeding out and needing to put those cholesterol plaques there, then having high cholesterol is not a bad thing whatsoever. Actually, feeling really, really good is a symptom of having plenty of cholesterol in the body. Cholesterol is incredibly important for 10,000 functions in the body, including not bleeding out of your arteries, but people just don't like their arteries blocking. So if we call that one a negative, there's still 10,000 other things that it's doing for us in a positive direction. Any other questions? Chatting? Thoughts? What can someone do to test for the 9p21 tissue paper arteries? So the way that I specifically know of is a company that I use in the office. They spit into a little vial. Probably takes about 5 to 10 minutes to fill that up. And once that's full, it goes into the genetic testing place, and it's run by one of the world's leading geneticists. And this guy is one of the most incredible souls that I've ever met in my life. He's probably going to be a Nobel Prize winner. Just an incredible, incredible individual. Anyway, it takes a couple of months to get those results back, and you get that full scope. There's probably 50, 60 different genetic markers. The 9p21 is one of them that's on that list. So it probably, unfortunately, insurance company doesn't pay for some of the really fun stuff when you're trying to just dig deep and look for things like that. So you're right around that $450, $500 mark for the full spectrum of all the hormone testing, but it's pretty awesome. Does natural lithium have the same negative issues that you mentioned? I'm not 100% sure if they're gonna, what negative issues are we? Oh, the prostaglandin pathway with lithium. Lithium will block those prostaglandin pathways, natural or otherwise. It will block those prostaglandin 1 and prostaglandin 3. So yes, it will. What do we do for the 9p21 gene if you've got 4 copies of it? You need to just be incredibly diligent with, actually, you probably wouldn't want to be the ultra endurance runner. You just putting in 8 hours of exercise a day, you're creating a lot of free radical damage, a lot of just damage to the body because you're just beating the crap out of it. Exercise is important, but it's a little bit more important to moderate that, to be consistent, to be progressively building as you're building, and not just like, all right, I haven't worked out in 30 years. I'm just going to go run 20 miles because I used to do that. It's just, you got to be a little bit more careful with the exercise. That it's progressive. You're keeping your heart rates a little bit lower so that you're not creating a lot of free radical damage. Dietarily speaking, you want to eat a low inflammatory diet, things with plenty of enzymes, plenty of the foods that we talked about. Those societies, that the way that they ate, you don't want a lot of processed and refined foods, breads, pastas, cookies, cakes, ho-hos, dum-dums, cereals, things of that nature are just going to be very inflammatory in nature and just make it harder for those arteries. On top of, it'll be that much more important to use anti-inflammatory type herbs, your turmeric, your ginger, boswellia, from an herbal standpoint, things like that from an anti-inflammatory standpoint. Free radical damage, so you got your antioxidants like glutathione that we talked about from an IV perspective, or superoxide dismutase, lipoic acid. There's a lot of vitamins that are considered antioxidants. So, keeping your antioxidant load up and very strong can go a really long way with that. Does krill oil? Well, krill is basically a type that you can get. Krill oil, you can get salmon, you can get mackerel. You can get oils from all sorts of different fishes. It's really, just another source of omega-3. So it's just, where are you going to get the highest dosages? I would prefer, especially from a treatment standpoint, I need to get, people give me all of 30 seconds to get them improvements. So, I sometimes will need to start off with something that's going to be a little bit, or work towards a little higher dosage so I can get a real effect with somebody's true disease process going on. But I love people to be somewhere between 4,000 and 8,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA combined together in fish oil. Most fish oils you're going to get at the health food stores are going to be rancid oils. They colorize them. They put all sorts of stuff, because there are a lot of times rancid oils. That's one place that you just do not want to skimp from a financial standpoint. I'd rather you give up 10 other supplements to get a really high quality fish oil, and get the dosages up, because it's just going to have that many positive benefits for somebody. These are good questions. Anything, you're welcome to speak. You're welcome to continue typing them in. What brands? In the office, I carry Metagenics, Standard Process. You can get stuff from the health food store. There's Nordic Naturals and Carlson's are probably two other. Blue Ice is another one that I've carried. Those five, usually I say keep it to those five when it comes to fish oil, unless you've really, really done your research inside and out and you know that you've got some really high quality stuff. You know, you can, if I can do it on here or not. Let's see. It doesn't give me the same option. Let me share my screen again. Let's try it this way. I'll just type it here. drchris.metagenics.com. It's one of the companies that I use a lot of their fish oil, and you can go right there and be able to order I usually get the EPA DHA 1000. That's one. You can go to standardprocess.com and create an account. I'd still have to approve it. And you need a code, and I don't actually have that code right off the top of my head, but you can call me or text me, email me, and I can give you the code so that you can have an account that you can, you know, order some of this stuff and you can have it shipped right to your house, and it's not such a big deal. Or we can, you know, obviously sit down, which is the whole point of this, and be more specific to your needs, your background, your genetics, your blood panels, hormone panels, whatever crazy fun testing we want to do, and be as specific as possible. Or, you know, you can be a little bit more generic and cover some of your major bases. You got your fish oil, you've got a whole food multivitamin like Catalin, you've got maybe some enzymes or probiotics. Just again, it depends on somebody's lifestyle and what it is that they've got going on. Let's see, what else do we have? Brands, we talked about brands of supplements. I mean, I'm particular to a few brands because I know that I need to get specific clinical results quickly for people. I need to make sure that when I'm using an herb, that it's the same quality and the same dosages as what has been proven time again in tons of studies that are done. There are massive amounts of research studies done on herbs, and some of them are phenomenal. Even a lot of medications even come from herbs, and even something like the white willow bark, which doesn't actually have the platelet problems, but that's where aspirin comes from, is the white willow bark. So you could get the anti-inflammatory effects without the negative platelet issues with just using white willow bark. There's a lot of herbs that are utilized and changed because man thinks that they're smarter, or they can just patent it and make money off of it. Herbs are really powerful, but if you're using the right stuff, you know, like echinacea, the world's leading herbalist, in my opinion, says everybody should take echinacea every day for the rest of their life. And there's a lot of companies that will sell you a product that has the echinacea plant in it, the leaves, the stems, the roots that are not very deep. But if you really want the true health benefits, you need it from the roots that are about 6 feet deep. But you're gonna pay more for those types of products, but then you're gonna get the actual effects that you're looking for. So Standard Process and their sister company MediHerb. MediHerb is out of Australia, and they have just as strict labeling laws on their herbs as we do on pharmaceuticals in this country. And they go through millions and millions of dollars worth of testing to prove that if I need this much of an active ingredient to create this therapeutic response, I know that it's there every time. And clinically, I have to use something like that. So, you know, you can only get those through doctors, but we can create, you know, patient accounts so that you can order what you need as well. I just don't know that particular brand. I mean, there are literally thousands of brands that are out there. I don't know that specific one, so I can't speak to it. It's not something that I've used personally. I'd like to add turmeric and ginger to my diet. So I can In the baking aisle. Okay, so yes and no. Turmeric in not so much in the baking aisle. You can buy turmeric and you can buy ginger in the produce section, and you can put them on salads. You can cook with them. You can make curries with them, and absolutely, that's one of the best places that you could go to add that into your diet. I'm not sure that you would get a full out, this patient has an inflammatory disease going on, or they've got a lot of inflammation that we really need to address, that I'm going to just, a couple of salads a day with a little bit of turmeric is probably not going to do what we're looking for from a treatment standpoint. But every chance that you can get to add some turmeric and ginger into the diet absolutely would be recommended. Just clinically speaking, you're probably going to need some higher dosages. And then one of the issues with turmeric is its absorption. There's a lot of products that will end up adding something called pepridine, which increases its absorption significantly, so that you can get those anti-inflammatory effects that much more. And when you combine things like turmeric, boswellia, and ginger, you're just enhancing a lot of those anti-inflammatory effects. Boswellia is probably one of the most well-researched and most powerful anti-inflammatory herbs that we have. Buying cinnamon, bulk food section, is this high quality enough therapeutic? Yeah. So if I was going to be using cinnamon, for example, one of the very powerful, it's got anti-inflammatory capabilities. One of my favorite uses of it, the cinnamon quills. It's a very concentrated cinnamon that's actually can be really helpful with blood sugar and diabetics. So, you know, cooking with something versus having it concentrated in an extract from an herbal standpoint are still going to be two different things, but I wouldn't discourage using plenty of cinnamon liberally. I think it actually would be, and you know, for the most part at Nature Time, you're not going to have to worry about, you know, them putting in a whole lot of other preservatives and crazy stuff. So you're probably going to be able to trust it from using it in my food perspective. Again, when you look at treating a disease, one, you're legally speaking, you got to be careful with what you're saying is actually treating a disease. But when you're trying to use it therapeutically, some of these dosages do need to be a little bit higher than you're going to probably get in food. If you could give a couple sentence recommendation to every person to help them build their immune system to fight off the common flu, cold, and COVID, what would I say? I would say a combination of everything that we've talked about tonight, actually. I think that it's more about our terrain than it is about the actual flu virus or the COVID virus. You know, you'll hear the random person say, oh, such and such of a person was an ultra marathon runner and they died from the coronavirus. They were so healthy. I'm not sold that they were so healthy. There's a difference between getting fit quickly and just beating the crap out of your body, destroying your hormones, creating massive free radical damage, and, you know, eating refined and processed stuff, and you're looking really lean, and, you know, you look like you're running a stride. That's not necessarily a healthy individual that has, and I'm not saying, you get the point that I'm making is that you can still look healthy on the outside and just be a wreck on the inside from an inflammation standpoint, and what's really going on as far as, you know, that could be somebody that had, you know, 4 copies of that 9p21 gene, and they can't absorb vitamin B12 because their genetics don't allow them to, so, you know, eating an anti-inflammatory type of a diet, which is going to be a lot of fruits and vegetables and a lot of, well, very, very little or no processed and refined stuff. You're going to spend most of your time in the produce section or in the meat section, as opposed to the whole rest of Wegmans that's all just bagged and boxed. If it's in a bag or a box and it can sit there for months and months and months, years, then there's very little nutritional value for the most part, and that's not going to help you at all. So hopefully that'll help with that. To lower my glucose, do I need a concentrated cinnamon or something else? I take glucose lowering on a multifactorial thing. I wouldn't just use, you know, cinnamon. Obviously, I would try to cut things off at the source and start eliminating sugar from the diet where I can. And specifically processed and refined stuff, but all sugars. Even fruit has a lot of sugar in it, and I would try to keep that at an absolute minimum so that you're cutting that off at the source. I need to regenerate the pancreas. So one of the most well-known herbs that actually has regenerative cells, a capability on the beta cells that make insulin in the pancreas, is called gymnema. It's one of my favorite herbs. It's actually fun in a live seminar. You can give everybody a little bit of gymnema, the liquid extract, and you swish it around your mouth. And then you open up a packet of sugar and put it in your mouth. And it's almost like having sand in your mouth. It totally anesthetizes your taste buds to the taste of sweet. And actually over a 3 to 4 week period of time, it really decreases carbohydrate cravings quite a bit. So it's one of my favorites. I usually will give it to a patient in a tableted form, but it's almost like in the pharmacology, I got a pharmacology exam next week, so we'll bring that in. There's disulfiram is a type of a drug that if you were to take, and even the smallest amount of alcohol, even using mouthwash, you could go into what's called the disulfiram reaction, and you will hate life in every possible way because you'll feel that miserable. Yeah, but it's a good deterrent to not have any more alcohol again. So there's a purpose for it. In the same way with gymnema, if you want to use the liquid and totally anesthetize your taste to sweet, and everything you put in your mouth from a sweet perspective tastes terrible, then, at some point I'd rather you not put it in your mouth. There's things like that. There's, balancing your gut flora that's going to help a lot. There's building up lean muscle tissue. Muscle is going to burn sugar. So the more that you put on 5 pounds of muscle, you're going to burn an extra 30 pounds of fat every single year just from having 5 pounds of extra muscle on your body. So that can help burn a whole lot of extra sugar. So gymnema, I'll type that in for you. I'm very specific about the brands that I use. The gymnema that I use comes from MediHerb. They're the company out of Australia, very, very strict labeling laws. I know that I've got a lot of the active ingredients that I need. Chromium, absolutely. It's a blood sugar stabilizer. People, I tell you, usually you get a uncontrolled, older, heavy diabetic, and I'm not saying that's you. I don't know who this is. But usually it's going to be hard to make them change every meal of the day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, strict as ever for the next 6 to 12 months. Sometimes I'll just say, you know what, give me breakfast. I want to have all the control in the world of breakfast. You get no sugar whatsoever. You're going to get some fat and some protein and start your day off right. And if you end up having 32 bear claws for lunch, then we'll deal with that at some point. But I want to stabilize your blood sugar. You haven't eaten more or less all night. If I can stabilize it, it's going to set you up for a better day for the rest of the day. If we can at least start with that, it goes a long way. Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. I'm glad to have you pick my brain. Like I said, I usually lecture for 10 or 12 hours at a time. So 2 hours is nothing for me. There's actually 1,001 things more that I would want to go to even with this particular seminar. I'm going to be getting into and having a lot more of these probably once a month just because of school purposes. Getting my nurse practitioner degree is a little bit more involved than I had expected. But I'm going to be having entire seminars just on Alzheimer's, on female hormones, on diabetes, on detox, on just, make a recommendation. I've spoken on just about everything out there. I travel around, mostly around the country. I've done some speaking outside of the country. To all sorts of doctors that, we have a lot of fun, and I've been able to accumulate a lot of information. When I'm not with my family, I'm either treating patients or I'm studying on how to help people. So that's pretty much my life, and I love every second of it. So that's what I'm here for. Is there anything to be done for there were 2 questions that people brought up. One was about macular degeneration, and the other one was about traumatic brain injury. I'll address those both really quickly. Macular degeneration, it sounds worse than it is, but there's actually been some really amazing studies showing with stem cell injections directly into the eye having some really profound impacts on macular degeneration. Beyond that, you want to help with vascularization and free radical damage, because they're end blood vessels by the time they get to your eye, and you want to have plenty of blood flow and free radical damage. When you get free radicals, or you're going to get little micro things that are going to end up just staying there and aren't going to circulate very well. You're probably, from an average standpoint, it's going to be easier to create if your macular degeneration problems were getting worse and worse and worse, you're probably going to take where you're at and create a baseline and not get significantly worse and worse and worse. That's going to be a little bit easier than completely retracting and going backwards. But you do all the things that we talked about, and looking at some different options with stem cell injections. There's a lot of potential there. For sure. And the other one that somebody had brought up on the questionnaire when you sign up was traumatic brain injury. There's 1,001 places to go with it, but one of my mentors, and I would say he's one of the leading neurologists in the world. This is a guy that I have watched in seminar in front of my own eyes take somebody who was apparently a normal 18-year-old, got into a car accident, and had developed what Johns Hopkins diagnosed Tourette syndrome. He had a very hard time, disjointed walking, and he's barking, and he had all these weird tics going on, and they diagnosed him with Tourette syndrome, and basically said, there's nothing we can do to help you. I watched Dr. Carrick not only bring it out and make it worse in a few minute period of time, but in less than a half an hour, it was completely gone. And this is something that Johns Hopkins said, it's irreversible when you're diagnosed with something like that. So this guy has been done grand rounds at all the biggest hospitals in the world and just doing some amazing things. Anyway, he's got over 1,000-hour, 15-module seminar just on traumatic brain injury. And one major take-home piece has to do with turmeric. When you've got traumatic brain injury going on, inflammation in the body, you've got these neural cells called glial cells that are chomping away, and they don't shut off. They just keep going, and that creates a lot of degenerative problems. And the only known thing, as of when I've gone through all that material, which probably 4 or 5 years ago, drug, supplement, anything, the only known thing to be able to shut off that process was turmeric. So, that would be a huge player as far as shutting off. And we're talking, even mild concussions on up to some more, traumatic things that are going on. Turmeric would always be one of the first things that any of my family would be put on if they had anything from a brain injury standpoint. Can you help vision field, brain filtering issues? Vision is actually a really fun one. There's times where I won't actually have somebody leave the treatment room until they've improved 2 or 3 lines on the Snellen eye chart. Vision on some level has to do with the way that the muscles control the lens of the eye and how well you'll be able to see. And your muscles are controlled by a balance of your nervous system, the fight or flight side and the rest and digest side. And if we can create a better balance, a lot of times you can improve vision. Actually, one of my favorite stories is a 13-year-old that came into my office, and he came in actually just because he was having some neck issues and back issues, and I didn't even do my job as a doctor to get into all the data. He's a 13-year-old kid, and I'm just helping him out with some simple neck and back problems, but doing my normal thing. Treated him 2 or 3 times, and I get a call from his ophthalmologist, and he says, what'd you do to my patient? I'm like, oh crap, what did I do now? He's like, no, you don't understand. We've been treating, me and 2 other neuro-ophthalmologists have been working with this kid for the past couple of years. And he has been the equivalent of he's naming off all of his measurements and stuff, but it was roughly the equivalent of 20/200 vision. And he came in the other day and it was 20/20. He's like, what did you do? And I'm like, holy crap, how did I do that? It just comes down to ultimately what Dr. Goodhart always taught us was everybody's different. You got to treat what the patient has going on. What might treat one person's migraine and, might be some toxin, and another person, it could be a spinal issue, and another person, it could be, they drink ridiculous amounts of diet soda and they're having massive amounts of aspartame toxicity. And everybody's so unique. That's why there is no, you come in and it's 30 seconds and everybody gets the exact same treatment. That's just not the type of office that I've got. It's, you know, the first visit's usually a good hour and a half, and, you know, we kind of go from there, and we might need to get into more advanced testing. We just try to be as specific with you as possible. Don't have acuity problem. That's good. Vision field. So vision field stuff too. So for example, so for fields, we're talking about top, bottom, left, right. The top part of your fields tend to be more of your temporal lobe. And if you've got more of a temporal lobe issue, there's 1,001 things that we can do from a brain rehab potential to send blood and light up the temporal lobes of your brain and to get them functioning better. The lower half of your vision fields are more of your parietal lobe, which has to do a lot more with sensations in general and the way that they're used in the body. But it, depending on what field, there's an area of the brain that you could do rehab with. Nerves need two major things to be healthy. They need food, so their oxygen and their food source, and they need stimulation. And if you don't stimulate a nerve, it will die. If, for example, if you had patches put on your eyes, at some point, without light coming in, the nerve would die and you would never be able to see again. It won't come back. The nerve will actually die. And the same thing's true for every nerve in the entire body. If it doesn't fire, it will die. And so when, you know, you've got field vision issue, I want to go to that area of the brain and get it firing and firing and firing as much as it can handle. Though there comes a point in time where, especially if somebody's very neurologically fragile, that you can't exceed their capacity. Meaning, if we're doing rehab in a certain area of the brain and all of a sudden their balance starts getting bad, or their blurry vision, or they're getting a headache, or, you know, you've exceeded what's called their metabolic capacity. So you got to be really careful with that. But as long as they can metabolically handle rehab, then we want to light those areas up as much as possible. I told you optometric therapy. I'm assuming that it's some of what I'm talking about, where you're going to be treating those different fields and lighting up different areas of the body. People call different therapies different things. A lot of times they patent these therapy names, but ultimately it comes down to stimulating the nerves and the eyes in different fields that need to be stimulated. What else do we have? Any other questions? This is fun. I mean, I could do this all night. I really enjoy it, but I know that it's late for people too. So I'm a night owl. I'll be up till 2 in the morning anyway for studying my own stuff. I'll go right from this to doing pharmacology for next week. Three midterms. It'll be fun. All right. Well, please, you know, take advantage of that that discount coupon. Spread the word. I'm gonna just back to the same page, that booking page of the website most of you probably got on. I'm gonna put a list of a lot of the seminars, the dates, so that I can kind of keep that updated on some of the next ones that we're gonna do. If you're particularly interested in one particular area, then let me know. We'll try to move those up the schedule. If you're gonna show up, then I'm gonna do the ones that you guys are the most interested in, and kind of go from there. We can even get into really controversial stuff and have fun talking about vaccines one day, and talk about, really get into COVID, and some of the things that I know about that as well. So maybe we won't record those ones, but good luck with exams. Also check out the work Dr. Lynn is using. Cool. Neuroacupuncture. Yeah, I use a lot of neurologic rehab and acupuncture stuff, and teach a lot of it as well. Absolutely. Cool. Well, thank you all for attending. 2 hours out of your middle of your week is not always the easiest thing to do. So I appreciate that very much. It's all been recorded, so it will be available too. So if you thought we went over some stuff that was beneficial, and you've got friends, family, or work acquaintances that would benefit, then I would encourage you to do that too. So thank you so very much, and I'll end that. Feel free to call me, email me if you have any other questions that you want to ask more privately. So thank you so much.